Hello and welcome to the Gunner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show after Arsenal have drawn 1-1 at Crystal Palace. A frustrating game for sure. Certainly a frustrating game. First half or first 20 minutes anyway. I certainly think that there was more than meets the eye to what was going on. It looked really, really promising. We got an early goal for Aubameyang, and then we were pegged back in the second half because we just couldn't sort of stamp our authority on this game as much as maybe we would have liked to have. And then, of course, a red card for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was really, really frustrating and probably killed off any chance of us really getting it, although we did have a really, really good chance at the end of the game with Lacazette and Pepe, but couldn't take the win in the end. So we're going to talk about all of that and get your thoughts in the live chat. Of course, now we have memberships on the channel. And speaking of which, Ashwin Watkins, thank you for tuning in, mate. Ashwin is one of our members. Thank you ever so much. He says, just here to test out my perks with the different emojis, which is great. You can get access to all of that if you want to join, and exclusive content as well. But back onto the game then, in terms of what you guys were saying. Omar says, such a disappointing result. I mean, you can't really get past the fact that we really should have taken a lot more from this game than we actually did. It's frustrating because we played a Palace side that were extremely under strength. They've got a hell of a lot of players out because of injury, and Arsenal are arguably at their full strength team. If we actually look at the lineup, it was completely unchanged from the Manchester United game. And for me, that team is more than enough to beat the Palace side that we saw today. But there were differing circumstances and definitely contingencies that happened that meant we couldn't quite achieve that today. TB says, I'm proud of the boys. Aaron Letchford says, such a frustrating match. Omar says that the ref was a joke. We will come on to some of those decisions in a bit. Wooden says, Xhaka passed the ball 10 yards backwards and sideways all game. I'm not sure I agree wholeheartedly with that. I think that actually his passing out wide was okay, but it wasn't the same Granit Xhaka that we've seen over the last couple of weeks or so. Ashwin says, I'm disappointed that we couldn't keep the intensity, but what's worse was the referee was absolute rubbish. I mean, let's talk about the first goal, because let's talk about the first minutes, in fact, because we came into this game and we came into it with a new hope and new desire that we hadn't really seen in the same intensity. The goals that we scored against Manchester United weren't quite like this. The quick interplay, the nice passing, the speed of passing that led to that first goal was Arsenal of old. Ozil to Lacazette out of his feet into Aubameyang with his perfect touch on his left foot to then strike it with his right. It was classic Arsenal, and we've missed that a lot. We have missed this type of football so much at Arsenal, and it's so frustrating that we don't see it enough these days. But we're hoping that that might actually mean that we've got a improvement happening for sure. I'm not sure if we're going to see too much in terms of this happening on a consistent basis, game in, game out, every single 10 minutes or so. But what I do think we will see is that we'll definitely see an Arsenal that fights for the ball a lot more for longer in these games. First 20 minutes we were harrying. Torreira, that's probably the biggest turning point of this. As soon as you saw Guendouzi coming on for Torreira, who just is nowhere near as good as Torreira in that position, you knew that Palace were going to be able to get at us a lot more. You knew we'd have lost our ability to take the ball back better than we had done, and without Torreira we really struggled. John Cronin says, I've just missed your comment, mate. There we go. John Cronin says, didn't lose especially as down to 10 men, which I thought was harsh sending off. Okay, let's talk about the red card, because we can talk about the equaliser in a little bit, but clearly the red card is the biggest talking point of this game. And for me, I don't understand how people cannot think that this is a red card. I don't really get how you cannot think that this is a red. It's off, studs are up, they go into the guy's ankle. It's with a decent amount of force. It could really injure the player. And I just don't really see the argument against it. The only argument that was coming across on the TV was that it wasn't that powerful in terms of speed. But we saw it in slow motion. It was the same speed in slow motion that we've seen plenty of challenges come across on the TV, and it looked horrific. It looked really, really bad. So please let me know in the comment, do you think it was a red card? Because I certainly do. Unfortunately, Unfortunate, but it was, says Kieran King. Omar says it was a straight red card. Woon says it was a definite red. Kodish, thank you ever so much for joining, mate. He says 100% red. M says clearly a red. TB says the red card was right. So clearly, a lot of you in the chat box as well were feeling that this was definitely a red card challenge. For me, it was 100% a red card. Surprised, as Kodish says there, that the ref gave a yellow. And this is the thing. This is why we can argue week in, week out about VAR, about how it's not being used properly. But for me, VAR isn't the problem. The video usage in the game isn't incorrect whatsoever. It is not incorrect because it's a computer system. It's black and white, and that's how it is. It's right and it's wrong. And the only difference is, the only issue with this system is that there is humans involved in the decision making. And if the decision making is being made that is subjective by people, then that's where the error is going to be. That is where you're going to find errors. And we've seen that there's going to be errors because these referees make mistakes. This referee thought it was a yellow card. The referees in the game at the weekend or yesterday ruled out West Ham's or didn't rule out West Ham's goal. When it, by the letter of the law, if it touches your hand and then it leads to a goal, it's handball, and that's what it was. Whilst that might be the rule that we discuss as being the wrong thing, that is the rule and that is how it is. But in this case, again, VAR comes in and gives the right decision, and it was the right decision this time. The people did make the right decision in this, and that now means that Aubameyang misses 3 games. 3 games, and I believe if I get up my fixture list, one of them is definitely Chelsea. The other one I believe is the FA Cup game against Bournemouth on the 27th of January. But the first one will be at home to Sheffield United, which is a really, really big game because Sheffield United are doing really, really well. They're up there in the top half of the table, challenging, ironically, for a Europa League spot. You could argue even top 4 at the moment. And we need to win that game to claw back positions in this league. And Aubameyang being out is going to be a big, big miss. And now the biggest kick on from this is that, in my mind, Martinelli cannot, point blank, be allowed to go to the Brazilian under-23s team for their tournament. I don't know where it is, but the under-23s Brazilian squad have got a tournament and he's been called up for it. And we cannot let Martinelli go out to the national side, because if we do, it means you're limiting yourself to Pepe, Laka and Nelson. And there's not much in terms of backup for a front 3 other than those. We had Martinelli and Nelson on the bench, and Bukayo Saka as well, but he's more of a backup for our left-back position at the moment because of the injuries we've got, so we can't really afford that situation. It's absolutely paramount that we do not lose Martinelli to the under-23 national team. Sam Wilson says Martinelli will do good. Kodish says it's Martinelli time. M says Auba being out is a blessing in disguise, gives a chance for Martinelli to shine. I wouldn't say that losing the Premier League's best striker is a blessing in disguise there. I see what point you're making there, but my God, I just don't think that you can turn around and say it's a blessing in disguise to lose Aubameyang. That's taking it just a bit far. Aaron Letchford said, now we know how Leeds felt without Xhaka getting a card, and now are you? I understand what you're saying, Aaron. I really do. But I cannot get into my mind. We talk about consistency with referees all the time. And when I tweeted out saying that it was a red, some of the first responses I was getting back was that, well, Ayu's not been booked yet. That's not how you cannot look at games that way. You cannot just think that it's tit for tat, because if you look at it as tit for tat, you're never going to be satisfied, because it's never going to be 100% equal. It's just, with human error, it just isn't. That's not how it is. It's never going to be 100% accurate, and you're never going to find it's going to work that way. So you need to look at instances in isolation. Ayew should have 100% been booked, 100 million% been booked, but he wasn't. But you can't use that as an argument against Aubameyang's red card. It just doesn't work like that. Let's talk about the equaliser and the second half as a whole, because what I thought would happen is that at the end of the first half, or the second half of the first half, Arsenal backed off. They weren't pressing as much as they did in the first 20 minutes. They weren't able to push Crystal Palace as much as they may have liked to have done. And definitely Torreira coming off, as I've already mentioned, probably was the biggest turning point of this game. Losing Torreira, I'm praying that this isn't a long-term injury and he was taken off as precaution. and that we will keep him in the side into the Sheffield United game, because we don't have him against Chelsea. That's a really, really big concerning game, and the Sheffield United game, and any game at the moment without Torreira is a really big concern. But I just think that we didn't apply ourselves as much as we needed to. We still harried and hustled more than we have done as an Arsenal side, even with 10 men. But it wasn't, in my mind, the same as what Arteta would have wanted his team to have committed in that second half. That's just how I see it. Please let me know what you think in the chat box. Avon Teddington says, that said, Tompkins put in a horrendous tackle and got a yellow. See, that was it on Martinelli? I believe it was on Martinelli. The Tompkins tackle is a straight yellow card. It is not a red. His feet is down. His studs aren't up. He doesn't go into the ankle. He goes into the side. That is nowhere near a red card. You cannot compare the two. If you look at them in isolation, you cannot say that Tompkins is a red and is equatable to that of Aubameyang's, because that just simply does not work. But for me, when we're looking at actually these type of tackles, it was a striker's challenge. Aubameyang's never really going to make that challenge again. It's not like he's a dirty player. We know that. He's not that type of guy. I don't think you can criticise him massively. It was a rush of blood. He went for the ball. He mistimed it, and it was a striker's challenge. And he's going to miss 3 games because of it. And that is a really, really big shame moving forwards, that we won't have him available. Javier says, we did fight hard, especially when down to 10. Mr. B says, we were playing scrappy on Palace level. AFC needed the ball retainer like Ceballos. He would have kept our rhythm and control in the game more in the second half. Ceballos was not even in the squad today to face them. No injury, no fitness problems. He wasn't selected. And that's a big concern for me, because for me, I backed Ceballos as someone to come in and be a real creative force as a number 8/number 10 who can play both roles. And if Arteta's thinking that this guy isn't worth putting in the squad or giving minutes to, I mean, he didn't play against Leeds either. That's a real big concern for me, that Ceballos just isn't in this squad. Maybe he sees it that he's on loan, he's going back. He doesn't want to focus too much on developing someone that isn't going to be in for the long term. But yeah, it's just a shame. It's just a real big shame that we're not seeing it. Mental Health Guy says, what is your thoughts on Laka's form? Laka's form doesn't concern me yet. I don't think you can let it concern you, especially because he's going to be leading the line for the next 3 games while Aubameyang is out for sure. The chance at the end with Pepe, a more confident Lacazette puts that to the side of the keeper, not straight at him. He panicked. His eyes lit up. He was a rabbit in the headlights in that moment and could not quite do what I think he wanted to deliver in that moment. And I mean, it was a great shot from Pepe, fantastic save from Guaita to palm it onto the post, and that saved him a point in that game. But yeah, it doesn't, because the thing for me with Lacazette is that he provides so much more. The biggest concern, it is a concern that Aubameyang is out, because Laka provides, as we saw today, so much for the Gabonese striker, and that is where a lot of our goals have come from. Is Laka's creation and ability to hold the ball up really enables us to play the style of play that we want. We're hoping that Martinelli can hit the ground running if he's kept in the squad, which he should do, and can take on some of that responsibility. But at the same time, I just cannot put too much blame on Lacazette. Omar said that Lacazette is poor. Arsenal Asset says Laka's finishing is bad at the moment, but quality assists for the goal. Loki says that we should sell Laka. Kieran King reckons that the midfield is the weakest area and we are slow. Lockie Dean says sell Laka. I've already talked about that. And Blur says that Lacazette's form doesn't concern you. It doesn't concern me because, as I've said already, that we weren't getting loads of goals from the Frenchman to start with. It's not like he's our number 1 striker. It doesn't concern me as if Aubameyang weren't scoring. A lot of Lacazette's play is based around his ability to bring other players into the game, and he's still doing that on a consistent basis. That's why it doesn't concern me right now, because he's not doing what he's not the main scorer of our goals. He's someone that enables other players on the pitch to play better, and he is still doing that. Masterson says, in my opinion, if KSC don't spend in January, fans need to boycott going to at least EPL matches. I mean, you can't pick and choose. If you're going to protest, and don't go to games. It's as simple as that. You can't just pick one over the other. That's how it works. TB says, don't scapegoat Lacazette. He's doing already. It's not only about scoring. 100% agree with you, TB. I don't think it is only about scoring. And ultimately, we need to have someone in the squad that can enable our other teams. Let's have a little bit of a focus on Mesut Ozil. First half, I tweeted out saying that even the staunchest of people that don't particularly like the German cannot say that this guy is no longer putting the effort in. He was chasing, he was harrying, he was getting tackles in, he was putting players under pressure. He was always, I would say, a hard worker in terms of the amount of running that he did, but it was actually the application of that running that he was doing. He was running about the pitch a lot and covering a lot of distance, but wasn't necessarily doing a lot with that time that he was spending running around. Now he is focused on getting the ball back as much as possible, and that is a really key part to his game. Someone else that was really good that I just saw pop up in the comment section below is Kolasinac, but Wolfgang reckons that he would sell Kolasinac and Mustafi and get another fullback and centre mid. I don't personally agree with that. I think that Kolasinac can absolutely flourish under Mikel Arteta. He's going to get a lot of competition when Tierney does come back from his injury, but that's not going to be until March. But I think that actually Kolasinac can be someone to really, really put the work in and be a lot of our creativity on that left-hand side. And that is going to be really, really key. Goose says the midfield still needs support in attack. At times we are holding back. The midfield, whilst certainly he's got a lot better in terms of ball retention and getting the ball back in terms of interceptions and tackles like Torreira is doing with Xhaka more secure in front of him, it isn't doing enough in the forward motion of the game. Xhaka's the only one that can really provide those passes out to the wider areas and connect the play, but centrally we aren't getting as much. Ozil isn't doing enough in terms of a creative sense on a consistent basis yet to be considered that he's on top form. I think, as I've already mentioned, his application, the way he's running around and harrying players is good, but he needs to create a bit more than he is currently doing in terms of his passes. And actually, that does partly come down to the fact that we need to actually include Ozil in the play more. We need to find him more. You look at Crystal Palace, whenever they were on the ball, they passed it to Zaha, and he created a lot of problems and finally getting the ball to Ayew to score the goal. But ultimately, we need to get Ozil on the ball a lot more if we want the guy to be more creative. So it isn't just down to the German. We need to say that. Moroccan Gunner says that Luiz was excellent today, and I have to agree with you. Absolutely so. Luiz was a really, really good player in terms of his passing, the long balls out to wide areas, got Aubameyang on the left-hand side in the first half quite a lot. That was really, really important to our play. His tackles were good. He was extremely unfortunate with the deflection for the goal, and that is just down to simple luck. We haven't had much luck over the last few months or so, and that was just another example of us getting unlucky. Leno, you can't really point to in that scenario. It's bouncing over him. It's completely wrong-footed, the German. And for me, you cannot say that David Luiz has had a bad game because of that situation with the goal. TGT member Aaron Letchford says, why are we on Laka when Pepe, Nelson and Ozil and our midfield are not scoring? He's doing a good job as a hold-up man for us getting forward. And that's a really, really key point, is that we are not scoring enough goals from other areas on the pitch. Pepe needs to get a little bit more consistent and a little bit more clinical. In the first half, he had a chance where he sat Tompkins down, or was it no, it was Gary Cahill. He sat Gary Cahill down, but he overran the ball off to the pitch for a goal kick. In that moment, he needs to be more composed. He needs to be someone that is going to take the chances and the opportunities that are given to him in those moments. And it's concerning to me that we aren't seeing enough of Pepe in the final third getting the opportunities. We saw at the end of the second half that chance where it was palmed onto the post, that he has got a really, really good shot on him, but he needs to be able to get into those positions more and able to use that weapon to a greater extent. Peace Tembo says, we haven't beaten Crystal Palace since December 2017 when we won 3-2. We need a game-changing player and a goal-scoring midfielder like Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Fernandes, whilst I like the guy a lot and I think he's got a lot of potential, I think that stepping up from the Portuguese league into the Premier League is something that we've seen players struggle with. We've seen the likes of Renato Sanchez move from Benfica to Bayern Munich and struggle there, move to Swansea and struggle there. So we're just not quite seeing players moving from Liga NOS and getting the best out of them. I mean, please throw some examples, prove me wrong in the chat. I'm happy for that to happen. I just think that Bruno Fernandes, for me, isn't quite the guy that would do that. And if Man United or Spurs sign him, it's not going to concern me too much, because at the end of the day, Spurs are going to be losing a much better player in Christian Eriksen, even if they bring in Bruno Fernandes. So that's how I see that. Woon says, any half-decent player in the world can play the passes Xhaka is playing. He isn't particularly good at anything, and we need better. If that were true, Woon, then we'd have someone else playing those passes. You'd see other players in the pitch playing those passes, but they're not. We're not seeing anyone else play those important and key passes. It frustrates me so much. People bring up Ronaldo going from Liga NOS. That's just a guy from a different planet. You think, come on, give me someone else. Ronaldo is not the guy that I'm talking about. He's an absolute mythical player. It doesn't work that way. I want someone who's come from Liga NOS. It's a fair challenge, a fair shout to give to you guys. Someone who's come from Liga NOS to the Premier League that has done and killed it. I'm really, really interested to know what you think. Getting back to that point that Win said about Xhaka, I don't see any other players playing those passes for Arsenal, and it frustrates me that we can have a couple of good games with Xhaka. The personal opinion of a lot of people changes. They get behind him. They think that this is good. He's much more improved. And then one game happens, and all of a sudden, people come out of the woodwork and absolutely slating him again. We cannot treat players like this. We cannot be so flip-floppy in how we have these opinions on players, because it's detrimental to the support. It's detrimental to how they work in the game. You cannot simply just 1 second be all for this guy, and then the next second, after one game, after 90 minutes, be completely against him again. Some people might say that they've always been against him, but you've got to give praise at the right times, and you've got to be realistic. Give criticism when it's due, and I don't think Xhaka had his best game, and I definitely can say that with self-certainty. But in terms of slating the guy and thinking that we need to get someone better right now, when he was linked with a move out of the club, it was a big concern. And for me, that shows how much quality and how much he brings to the team. Still waiting for some of those suggestions. Sanchez at Swansea, says Manu Clutch. Yeah, it didn't go too well. I've already bring up Renato Sanchez. Pereira, which one? Is that, I don't think that's Andreas Pereira, is it? I'm not sure that works. Ruben Neves. Ruben Neves is a good shout, Marwin. Fair play for that one. Ruben Neves has done very well since moving to Wolves. Definitely something that we would be interested in. Ricardo Carvalho and Raul Morelos back in the day for Chelsea. They definitely did okay. Moutinho, he went on a bit of a tour around Europe before ending up in the Premier League, and he is a very quality player. But you're seeing these players coming from the Portuguese league. They're not the number 10s. Let's get some of the number 10s in there who you think have moved from Liga NOS and have improved players since moving from that position. Because we've looked at players like William Carvalho, for instance, who was a defensive midfielder, has not really been able to do it as much. Nakajan says, Ziyech, I know that he was FC20 and then Ajax. Did he play in Liga NOS before that? If he did, I mean, we've not seen him do it in the Premier League yet, but it'd be interesting to see what Ziyech would do moving forwards. Let's get back to the game and round this show off with a final few thoughts. I think that ultimately this is a point that we can be pleased with, considering we had a man sent off and took an early goal in the second half, and we were obviously down to 10 men for quite a lot of it. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's frustrating that I get that we want to win these games and it's important, but when you consider the situation that we're in, the Premier League form is important, that we don't drop points in terms of losses. I can take a point at Crystal Palace. It's a place that we've gone to on several occasions and not picked up points and really struggled to win games there. So I'm not too disheartened by this performance. I'm more disheartened about the fact that we couldn't quite get the result in terms of the performance and the commitment of some of these players throughout the 90 minutes, even though that's been what's been preached to us for several days now. That's going to wrap up the show for us today. As I've mentioned, as has been going on the bottom, please, if you want to get access to exclusive content and you want to get some extra bonus stuff in terms of our live chats, if you want to get your badges up on the screen like Avon Teddington has and like the guys in our group chat, then please do subscribe to the channel and click that join button. You can get exclusive content. I had a chat with Football London's James Benge, and he told us all about the links to Upper Meccano. So if you want to find out all of that stuff, then become a member and watch that content. Thank you ever so much for tuning in today, people. There's going to be a podcast most likely tomorrow evening, so make sure you tune in for that one, 9 o'clock as always on a Sunday. I will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.